Hello. I've got my friend here today, my new friend, Timmy the Tiger. Say hi, Timmy. All the boys and girls are so happy to meet you. Are you happy to meet them? Great. Well, we have a wonderful Bible story again for you today, and Timmy wants to hear today about a man named Saul in the Bible. Have you ever heard of a man named Saul in the Bible, Timmy? Well, we're going to learn about him today. But first, we have a big word to talk about. The word is obedience. Do you see the word obedience? Maybe you don't know how to read yet, but when you learn to read, you will find out that all of these letters together make the word obedience. It starts with O, B, E, then D, I, E, N, C, E. Do you know all of those letters? Well, let's learn a song about obedience. It goes like this, and I wrote the letters because you have to be able to say the letters in the word obedience to sing the song. So let's just learn this part first. O, B, E, D, I, E, N, C, E. Let's do that again. O, B, E, D, I, E, N, C, E. Now you try. Good. And the rest of the song goes like this. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. And then it says, doing exactly what the Lord commands, doing it happily. Doing exactly what the Lord commands, doing it happily. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. And then we say, O, B, E, D, I, E, N, C, E. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Do you like that song? I like that, don't you, Timmy? And it is so true that the best way to show Jesus that we love him is by obeying. Obeying his word, obeying our parents, right? Well, our Bible story today is about a man who did not obey at first because he did not believe in God. And you know, there's some people in the world that don't believe in God. Maybe they weren't taught about God. Maybe their parents or no one brought them to church when they were a kid. And maybe they did go to church, but they still don't believe in God. And that's sad, isn't it? Because God created us. He created the whole world. And he loves us, doesn't he? Well, the man in the Bible's name was Saul, that we're going to talk about. And he was not a very nice man. He did not believe in God, but we're going to talk about what happened to him. And first of all, after Jesus went back to heaven, after he had died on the cross and rose again on the third day, you remember that story from Easter? You remember that? Well, after he had done that, Jesus went back to heaven. And he had risen from the grave, and he had lived on the earth for a little while longer, and then he went back to heaven, and he left his followers to lead the church. His followers preached about Jesus in Jerusalem. thousands of people became believers. The Jewish religious leaders, they were not Christians. They did not believe that Jesus was God. And they wanted to keep people from talking about Jesus. They wanted Jesus' friends to stop telling others how Jesus died and came back to life. So do you know what they did to me? They threw people in jail because they believed Jesus and told others about him. That's sad, isn't it? And that's what was happening here. The mean people wanted Jesus' friends to stop telling others how Jesus died and came to life. So they started putting them in jail. And Saul, there he is right there. Do you see him? He's holding that man by the arms. He persecuted believers. That means he hurt them and put them in prison. He was mean to Jesus' followers. So people moved from Jerusalem to be safe. Wherever they went, they told their new neighbors about Jesus. More people became believers. So you know what Saul did? He followed them. Saul followed them and planned to bring them back to Jerusalem and put them in prison. So he was going to Damascus to try to stop the Christians. And here he is, on his way to Damascus, on his way to put the believers in prison. Jesus stopped him. And do you know how he did that, Timmy? He stopped Saul with a bright light. A light brighter than the sun shined around Saul. It was so bright that it blinded Saul. He fell to the ground. And then Saul heard a voice. It was Jesus. Have you ever had someone shine a flashlight in your eyes? Do you know how bright that was? Like that? And it probably hurt your eyes, didn't it? Well, imagine a bright light from heaven, as bright as the sun. When you look at the sun, it hurts your eyes, doesn't it? It's not good to look at the sun for very long, is it? Well, that's what happened to him. And he couldn't help but to look because the light was so bright. He had to close his eyes so he wouldn't see it. And then the voice called him, and it was Jesus talking to Saul. And Jesus told Saul that he did not want him to disobey him anymore. Saul knew then how wrong he was to fight against Jesus. He accepted Jesus as the Son of God, and he could not see for 3 days. One of Jesus' friends came to lay hands on Saul's eyes after 3 days, and he could see again. And here is the man that put his hands on Saul's eyes. He listened to Jesus and obeyed him when Jesus said, "Go to this man and help him to see again." After Saul was baptized by the man, he began preaching about Jesus. Now he wanted everyone to believe in the Son of God. He wanted to do everything he could for Jesus and to tell others about him. That's a great end to that story, wasn't it, Timmy? I'm so glad that Saul decided to follow Jesus. And do you know that God actually changed his name to Paul? In the Bible, it says because his life changed so much, God gave him a new name. So his name went from Saul to Paul. And our memory verse for this story is found in Mark chapter 5, verse 19. It says, "Go to thy friends and tell them." And that is what Saul, who became Paul, started doing. And the Christians that he was hurting and persecuting and throwing in prison, they had been telling others about Jesus, right? They had been doing what God wanted them to do. They had been obeying, and that's what we need to do. So remember our verse, go tell thy friends, and remember our new word, obedience. It's important to obey. It's important to obey our parents and God. Isn't that right? Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.